Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPaWrites here again, and today I want to give my early ranking of all the characters in the First Descendant as of launch, knowing that this is subject to change as we have new characters unlocked, balance changes with buffs and nerfs, and also some new weapons mods and all that kind of good stuff. Also, if something pops up that is absolutely broken, I'll definitely leave a pinned comment down below, but otherwise, this ranking is going to be based upon power level with also some vibes included as well based on playstyle, how much I enjoy the character, and how good they are in different situations, early, mid, and late game. So starting off, we have Lepic, who I think is one of the more divisive characters. I think he's solid in B tier, but I know there are some people who love him and some who can't stand him at all and don't think he's very good. I have people arguing with me on Twitter saying he's the best character in the game. I definitely disagree with that. I do think he, as a fire based grenade user, is going to be fun for a lot of people. I just don't know if he has the potential as some of the other characters in the game, especially as you advance towards mid to late game, and scaling your DPS is very, very important. That being said, he's a solid starter option and he is very fun to use. So if you're just constantly playing the base version of the game, if you're not really grinding end game or anything like that, then that's not going to be a massive deal to you and he's going to be just fine. But if you are an end game player, he might not appeal quite as much unless you have a very perfect combination of weapons and mods on him. Then we have Ajax. Ajax, I think, is going to go up in A tier. And the reason being is two things. One, we don't have that many tanks in the game with two of them, and I think he's one of the better options as the tank characters. So for that reason, I think he's going to be the better starting option for a lot of people, especially because he is usable throughout early game, especially if you're struggling. Yes, in early game, he's not going to be as standout because you can just mow through enemies for the most part, and other characters can do so much faster, but he will be very valuable to have on your team when you're taking on some of the Void Intercept battles and some of the more difficult content. So I think on a squad and maybe not as a solo player, he's going to really shine. Solo, it makes it easy to stay alive. You just won't be clearing content quite as fast. Then we have Viessa, and she's another one that's interesting. I think she's B tier. I've seen her ranked lower oftentimes, but for me, I think she's solid because she does a lot of things well. And so she's more well rounded than some other characters. And also, I do think her ice powers are fun to use in a way that not every character is. And so that's why I'm going to rank her in B. I do know that she doesn't scale as high as some of the other characters at times. Some other characters are easier to use, but she does provide some utility on top of just her own base damage. So that's why I'm going to rank her a little bit higher. I chose her as my starting character because I feel like she does a lot of things well enough, especially in the early game, and it does make for a fun character to use, but I understand. Now we've got Jayber. I think he's an A tier character. He is very good. His turrets are incredibly useful, especially in some Void Intercept battles and maybe some harder dungeons. Not only do you have a healing turret, you have a damage turret, and just overall very versatile, very nice as a unit on your team, and I think he is huge as a option for a lot of different squads, and he does make it so you can play a little bit longer range with his turrets to control some area, and you can use some of the heavier damage weapons like the snipers and everything in the game without really having to worry about not doing enough damage, not providing enough utility for the team, and all that kind of good stuff. If you're a solo player, he is another good option because you essentially will always have a turret to watch your back, always have healing as well. So I think he is one of, if not the most versatile characters in the entire game. Now we have Sharen, a character I wish was better. I don't like her as much as some other characters on this list. I think she is not great, and for what she does as like a stealthy rogue character, there's not enough close range incredible damage dealing options for her to shine. So that's why she's going to rank a little bit lower. Is I just don't think she has the burst that you would want for a character with her skill set. She doesn't do enough outside of that high DPS, essentially back shots, critical hit, backstabs in the game to really make her effective enough compared to some other options. And that's why I'm going to drop her down just a bit. Now we have Gley, a character who is absolutely broken in some of the betas, and I think is still incredibly valuable. So I'm going to put her up into S tier. She's going to be the first of the S tier characters, and I think she's fantastic. She is one of those characters that high risk, high reward, if you get her playstyle down, can be unbelievably good. And I think she's one of those characters that will shine for a long period of time and would be one of the first unlocks for a lot of people if they're looking for that style of play. Yes, she takes a little bit of time to learn, but there is that bit of risk reward skill gap factor that I think is going to appeal to a lot of different people. Now we have Blair, who is another that I don't like. I'm going to put him C tier. I'm actually probably going to drop Sharen down to D tier because he's better than that. He's a dot fire-based damage dealer, and ultimately I don't like his skill set. I don't like his perks. I don't like the way he plays. He doesn't really scale that high, and there's a lot of reasons why he drops down just a little bit for me personally. I think he is fine. If that's your favorite character, I understand, but also I think there's just better options in what he does, and that's why he's going to drop down some. Now we have Bunny, just purely for the aesthetic. She is S tier, but also she's very good. She does a lot of damage. Her movement is insane. She does a lot of things very, very well. And while she struggles in certain types of content, like if you're capturing zones, for example, or if you have to stay still for any length of time, it really kind of ruins her kit. Her scaling and the ability to get, not only unlock her very early on, to get a weapon that she uses very well early on, but also the fact that she is able to do a lot of things throughout early, mid, and late game. She's very fun, and ultimately she's probably the best character in the game if I had to pick one. And there's a reason that she was promoted so heavily in the marketing, and that's because how good she actually is. Now we have a character who I think I rank a lot higher than other people, and that is Freyna. I think she is fantastic. I want to put her in A tier. I think other people have her in B or C, but I think she is great. She is my favorite character currently in the game, and ultimately, I love dot characters. I think while they don't scale as high as some other burst DPS, I do think that her ultimate ability does a ton of damage. I think her different abilities allowed for good crowd control. She can be incredibly tanky, especially in fights where you have a lot of melee enemies. You can essentially just spawn camp them with your poison damage just spreading from one to the other. You become incredibly tanky. I think her kit is one that, again, it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but once you do, she is phenomenal. Yes, there are some other options. I think Valby is better overall for most players. I think Valby is incredible and also another S tier. However, I think Freyna is just incredibly fun and one of those characters that I absolutely love. And so, yeah, Valby, if you didn't know, her crowd control, her damage, everything with her is just incredibly good. She is not as difficult to use as either Gley or Bunny, and I think she's the best all-around character for the First Descendant overall. I think she does everything well and just can be used not only if you need some good weapons, good mods. That doesn't matter as much with Valby, and I think that's what separates her from a lot of the other characters in the game. Gley, you kind of have to build into a little bit. Bunny, you can not have to build into, but you have to play a certain style. With Valby, she can play a lot of different styles. She can do a lot of different things, and she is just incredible. Now we have Kyle. Kyle's one I've seen a lot of people praising, but I don't know if I personally see it. He's not really for me. I prefer Ajax as a tank, and while Kyle looks very fun, I just don't think he's worth picking up to me early on. Yes, if you get the right pieces for him, he is fantastic, but ultimately, I just don't see it personally. I think he is a character that will have a dedicated player base. There are people who are going to run him nonstop and be very good. You'll always want to have a Kyle or an Ajax on your team, but unfortunately, I would prefer Ajax in many scenarios, and that's just a personal preference there. Hopefully, a lot of people like Kyle. I also think he just feels kind of generic to me, so that's the other reason why I'm not as big of a fan as some other people. Now we have Seismo, who's a burst DPS. I want to like him more. Everything I've seen has him down in C tier. I haven't seen a lot of people running him, and I think that's for good reason. He is one of the least exciting characters for a couple reasons. One, while his burst DPS is incredible, his survivability and his versatility are not there whatsoever. So it might be nice to have a built SEMO for incredible burst damage for certain missions. Otherwise, he just doesn't compete in a lot of different ways, and that's why he's going to struggle just a little bit. And so that's why I'm going to drop him down. He is, in my opinion, the least useful of the new 3 characters that they added right before launch. Then we get to Enzo. He is a B tier, in my opinion. I think his utility is nice. I think he will come in handy in a lot of different missions, whether it is hard dungeons when you're running out of ammo constantly or something of that nature. I just don't think the fun factor is there, and I also don't think that he is going to really be useful in 90% of the game, and so for that reason, he's going to drop down. While I want to like him, I think his utility is going to be really good in certain situations. Because he is so situational, it's going to be hard for me to recommend anybody unlock him all that often. And finally, we have Yujin. He is probably the best and only true healer in the game. Like, yes, Jayber has a healing turret, but Yujin is the only dedicated hero, so I'm going to put him in A tier. He is likely going to be incredibly useful for certain endgame squads. Once we get the mega dungeon and things like that, I could see him being very valuable. So that's why I'm going to put him in A tier. Everything I've seen, his healing is tremendous, very useful. Keeping players alive is often just as important, especially if there's no timer for a battle. Keeping players alive is going to be more important than just doing max amount of damage. So that's why it's going to be ranked up that high. Ultimate Lepic. Now, this is when we get interesting. In general, I would say the ultimate versions will go like a slot above potentially. For example, Lepic and Viessa, I would say they are a bit better with their ultimate versions. Ajax is probably still in A tier, not quite S tier, although Ultimate Ajax will probably eventually slide into S tier. I haven't seen enough from the Ultimate characters. They just get stat boosts, essentially, and for most characters, that's going to be huge. Now, Ultimate Bunny, the look, the aesthetic, everything, the skill bonus, she is obviously going to be an S tier as well. And then same thing for the Ultimate Gley, also another S tier option. So that's where those are going to fall. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of useful characters in the game. You can pretty much have an option for a good build with every character. So even Sharen down at D tier is not going to be a terrible character necessarily. It's just in comparison with the others, I don't think her playstyle stands out as much. I think whatever decision you decide to make, whatever characters you use, if you get the right mods, if you get the right weapons, they can perform very, very well. So keep that in mind. Don't let anyone tell you that your favorite character is obsolete. And also, let me know in the comments down below. What would you agree or disagree with this tier list? I'd love to hear from you guys. I really enjoy making these tier lists, and we'll do so going forward. Maybe with the boss fights, maybe with the ultimate weapons going forward as well. Let me know what other First Descendant content you want to see in the comments down below as well. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. My name is JoPa. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.